Why would you call 911 before you even know what the emergency is? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about this 911 call that was just recently released in the Idaho 4 case. Now, I wasn't sure if we would ever hear this call, so I was surprised when it came out before trial. But it's here, it's authentic, and we're going to talk about it. So I want to talk about the 911 call as well as the text messages between Dylan and Bethany, because in my opinion, they go hand in hand. But let's start out with the text messages and the events that led to Dylan messaging Bethany. Now we know that Dylan heard and saw a lot of things in the house that night, and she was trying to rationalize what she was seeing by thinking that she might be imagining these things because she was intoxicated. But how often do you hear of someone drinking too much and then hallucinating? I don't think that's a very common occurrence. I think that this is how Dylan was trying to rationalize what she was seeing. I think that she did see who she thought was Kaylee run up the stairs and back down the stairs. I think that she did hear Kaylee say, "There's someone here." And I think that she did hear crying. I think that she heard a lot of things, and I think that she saw a lot of things, and she was terrified. She was freaked out, and that's why she messaged Bethany. Now, in my opinion, one of the reasons that she messaged Bethany was possibly so she could see if Bethany was hearing the same things that she was hearing. Maybe get some confirmation. If she thought that she was imagining these things, maybe she was texting Bethany to see if she was hearing the same things. Now, in the messages that Dylan sends to Bethany, she lets her know that she's freaked out, she's scared, and that she just saw a strange man inside their house after hearing all of these horrific noises. So Bethany lets Dylan know that she's scared too, but she doesn't appear to be on the same level of freaked out as Dylan. Now, something else that I thought was interesting is that Dylan's telling Bethany, "I'm terrified." And Bethany tells Dylan, "Run down to my bedroom because my phone is dying." So basically, leave the safety of your bedroom. I know you're freaked out, but leave the safety of your bedroom, run across the house where you just saw this strange man and heard all of these horrific noises, and come down to my bedroom because my phone is dying. I mean, Bethany must have had a charger. They made the 911 call from her phone. So it seems as though she would have charged her phone that night. But that was something that just caught my attention because it almost made me wonder if Bethany had some sort of sense of security that Dylan would not be attacked if she left her bedroom. Almost like, maybe they knew these people. Now, when Dylan gets down to Bethany's bedroom, they just sit there and wait until morning. Think about it like this. You're in bed, asleep, or laying in bed, and it's after 4 a.m., and you get a message from someone inside your house, either a family member or a roommate or a guest, and they're telling you that they're hearing horrific noises that are freaking them out and that they're very scared and that they just saw a strange man inside your house. How are you going to react to that? Are you going to tell that person, "You know what, run over to my room because my phone's dying and we'll sit here together and do nothing about it"? I mean, it seems as though there would be some urgency. I realized that this was a party house, but I've lived in party houses before. And when you see someone who doesn't belong, you know that they don't belong. And in my opinion, if Dylan would have seen someone, say like Brian Koberger, inside her house, who she's never met and never seen before, it seems like that would be cause to panic and definitely cause to call for help. But they don't do that. It just seems strange that through Dylan's messages to Bethany, you can tell that she knows that something's wrong. She knows that something bad is happening inside this house. Why would she be so freaked out? Why would she be terrified if she didn't know that something bad was happening inside this house? Now, is it possible that maybe Dylan and Bethany had a sense of security that they wouldn't be attacked because they possibly knew these people? That would give them a sense of security. This person's not going to attack me. And Dylan and Bethany, at this point, they probably don't know that lives are being taken. They might think that it's just one big fight going on inside this house, and they're just trying to stay out of the way. It might not have even entered their mind that lives are being taken and that theirs could be next, because it wouldn't make any sense for them to just sit inside Bethany's room if they felt like they could be attacked next. So now Dylan is in Bethany's bedroom on the first level. We don't know if they fell asleep or if they stayed up all night just sitting in Bethany's bedroom. Now we know that after 10 a.m., Dylan begins contacting people as well as her dad. She has a text message conversation with her dad right before the 911 call is made. And we also know that she did message Hunter J. Now, in this paperwork that was just released with the transcripts of these texts, it says that Dylan received a message from J, who I believe is Hunter J. And a lot of people thought that it said bro. But in my opinion, this is Hunter J texting Dylan back saying be right over. Just like when people say BRB for be right back. I don't think he was saying bro. I think he was saying be right over. Now, we don't know what time Dylan and Bethany left Bethany's bedroom and walked out of that room into the house. But we do know that the 911 call was made at 11:55 a.m. The call was made from Bethany's phone, and I believe that it was Bethany who was the first person to talk to the dispatcher. Now, a lot of people think that it was Dylan on the phone at first, but in my opinion, I think it was Bethany. And Bethany is the first one to talk to this 911 operator, and she sounds beside herself. She sounds very, very upset, and that was something that was kind of confusing because she sounds very emotional. There's a lot of emotion in her voice while she's talking to this operator. And it sounds like someone who had just come across a very horrific crime scene. But the problem is, at this point, it doesn't seem as though Bethany knows anything about this crime scene. Like that she has seen it or that she has seen these victims. Because she obviously hasn't told anyone else around her. Because at this time, in the beginning of the 911 call, Bethany is the only one that's freaking out. And I mean, she's freaking out. She can barely talk. So it would make sense that Bethany was very upset when she made this 911 call if she already knew what the emergency was, And I want to get to that because that's another aspect of this 911 call that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why did they call 911 if they didn't even know what the emergency was yet? Bethany says, something happened in our house. We don't know what. So it's almost like they just decided to call 911 finally that morning. Why didn't they call 911 when they were hearing all of this noise that night? It just seems odd that they just decided to make that 911 call without even knowing what the emergency was. They hadn't gone and checked on Ethan and Xana or Kaylee and Maddie. They hadn't gone upstairs to investigate what they were hearing the night before. It's like they just waited all night until morning and then finally decided to call 911 without knowing what the emergency was. So that seems odd to me that they would do that. Like they would pre-call 911 for a crime that they don't even know about at this point. Something else that I want to talk about when it comes to Bethany and this 911 call is that a lot of people have said that they believe that it sounds fake. They believe that Bethany is putting on an act. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm not going to talk too much about Bethany's tone during the 911 call, only because we never know how someone is going to react when they're having to make this type of call. I mean, if you've ever had to call 911 because you have found a loved one or anyone deceased, it's a very stressful call to make. So I'm not going to talk too much about Bethany's tone in the call. I just thought that it was awkward that she is so emotional without even knowing what's going on. So after Bethany talks to the dispatcher, she hands the phone to Emily, who we've heard is dating Hunter J. And Emily seems very composed. She seems to be under the understanding that Xana got drunk last night, passed out, and that she's not waking up. That's the extent of what it seems that she knows at this point when she's talking to the dispatcher. But she's very calm. So obviously, she's not on the same level as Bethany when it comes to being emotional. And they're all together. All four of them are together. So it's almost like they're making two different calls. I mean, Bethany is hysterical and Emily is calm and composed. Now, after Emily, then Dylan takes the phone. And Dylan, in my opinion, thinks that she's on a call with 911 more about the crime than about the medical emergency, because she's trying to tell the 911 operator what happened. She tells the 911 operator, or she asks the 911 operator, can I just tell you what happened? You know, the 911 operator, she's trying to get help to the person who they called 911 about, Xana. You know, she's thinking this is a medical emergency. So the 911 operator really isn't paying attention to the explanation that Dylan begins to try to give. Also, this is where we hear the 4 a.m. time. So Dylan says, you know, at 4 a.m. this morning. So it almost seems as though Dylan is now trying to tell the story. She's trying to tell this 911 operator what happened and what time it happened. But of course, the 911 operator, her main priority is the medical emergency. But it almost seems like when Dylan is talking to this dispatcher that she is trying to tell her about the crime. You know, the dispatcher is trying to get information about the medical emergency, and Dylan is trying to tell her what she thinks happened. And I think that this is where, you know, the narrative begins. It begins with Emily, you know, because Emily's talking to the 911 operator, and then she says, oh, and by the way, there was a man in their house last night. Kind of like it's just a passing thought. Now, something else is that as Dylan is talking to the dispatcher, you hear Hunter J, and he's calling out for Xana. He's calling out for Xana, calling out for Ethan, and that's a good indication that their bedroom door was closed. I believe that Hunter J is talking through the door. But also, while Dylan is talking, you hear Hunter J say, get out, get out. And that's when, you know, we think that he found Ethan and Xana. But then right after that, he takes the phone and he sounds pretty calm. I mean, he sounds like he's under some stress, but not the type of stress that he would be under if he just found his best friend and Xana, deceased, who were attacked with a knife. It's odd because he doesn't sound like he just came across Xana and Ethan. He's talking very calmly to the operator. You know, she asks him, is she breathing? And he says, no. So throughout this entire call of 4 people on this phone, not one of them mentions this horrific crime scene. Not one of them mentions all of the body fluid. Not one of them mentions that Ethan and Xana look like they've been attacked with a knife. So to me, that's odd. You know, this dispatcher talked to 4 different people, and it almost seems as though they're describing something different than what we've heard that this is. It almost sounds like they're describing an OD. That's what it sounds like to me. It doesn't sound urgent, like this was, one hell of a battle, or that, this is a horrific crime scene. To me, this sounds like someone who's calling in for somebody who OD'd, which is maybe what they thought happened. Maybe they thought that Xana and Ethan had OD'd in Xana's bedroom, and that's why they were afraid to go in there and look. But it doesn't sound like 4 college kids who just found 2 of their friends stabbed to death in a very brutal way. It doesn't, So it seems odd because it almost seems like out of all 4 of these callers that they all had a different demeanor. They all had a different reaction. You have Bethany, she's freaking out. You have Dylan. She seems, like I said, on edge, but she's relatively calm. You have Emily. She seems very calm and composed. And then you have Hunter J. And he seems pretty calm for someone who we think just found his best friend deceased. So it's very odd because this call, this 911 call, in my opinion, does not match the crime. And in my opinion, this is the reason why law enforcement did not want to release this call. There's no description of smells or anything that they're seeing. Now, I know that it's been said that these crimes were isolated to the bedrooms where they happened. And that's where all the body fluid was, that it was all kind of contained in these 2 bedrooms. But investigators said that this was one of the most horrific crime scenes that a lot of them had ever seen in their careers. They said that there was body fluid everywhere. So I have a hard time believing that whoever committed this crime was able to go from room to room and walk all over this house without leaving any kind of trace, without leaving any body fluid around the house. Now, I'm not saying that the whole house has to be covered in body fluid, but it would seem as though there would be footprints, there would be splatter, there would be signs of body fluid. We've heard about the cast off, and we've heard about how brutal these attacks were. So it seems as though whoever attacked these victims would have left some signs inside the common area of the house that a very brutal crime had occurred. It doesn't seem as though this call was, describing the same crime that a lot of us have been digging into for over 2 years now. We've heard about this horrible, horrible crime scene. So to me, that seems strange. And nothing about this case has been normal. Everything about this case has had one thing or another that makes no sense whatsoever. So it would only make sense that the 911 call would be just as confusing. But I think a lot of this, and we've said this from the very beginning, law enforcement only has to go on what Dylan and Bethany say. They have the evidence and they can, collect evidence and they can look at everything at the crime scene. But really what they have to go off of is what Dylan and Bethany are saying. Now, since the very beginning, I've always said that I don't believe that Bethany and Dylan had anything to do with the initial crime, with the attacks. But I don't understand how everything got so confusing between Dylan and Bethany. It seems pretty simple. Dylan heard a bunch of horrific noises inside the house. She saw a strange man in their house, and she was terrified. She runs downstairs to Bethany's room because she knows that something very bad has happened, and then they just sit there until morning. Then in the morning, they decide to call 911 without even knowing what the emergency is. So they don't go up and check on their friends. They don't go up into the house to see what may have happened the night before. They just decide to call 911. That's strange. And then the 911 call itself, it seems like four people having four different experiences. It just seems odd. I've never accused Dylan and Bethany of anything. I've always tried to be very mindful about what I'm saying about Dylan and Bethany because, like I said, I don't think that they had anything to do with the initial crimes. But their actions after the crime are what is suspicious. As much as I've tried to rationalize, what happened with Dylan and Bethany and how they handled this situation, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. And I've tried to make sense of this, but the more that comes out about Dylan and Bethany, the weirder that it looks, the more they look suspicious, in my opinion. So we're going to stay on top of this as always, and we're going to talk a little more about all of the things that are going on in the Idaho 4 case right now. I think that Judge Hippler let the genie out of the bottle, and now we're going to be getting a lot of information. So stay tuned for that. And if you hear a lot of noise in the background, it's because the wind is trying to blow my house down. So I apologize for that, and I hope that I can minimize that for this video. I also want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who supports my channel. I have a lot of new subscribers and my channel is really growing and I truly appreciate it. I couldn't do this without you all. So it really, really means a lot to me and it's something that I never forget about. So I want to say thank you. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. I hope that y'all had an amazing day. We'll see you next time.